Hi everyone. Today we're going to continue with chapter 7.3, estimating a proportion, and our objective for today is going to be to construct and interpret a confidence interval for a population proportion. Alright, so before we're able to do that, we need to take a look at what's called the standard error of p hat. And the standard error of p hat is an estimate of the standard deviation of the sampling distribution of p hat. And this standard error of p hat estimates how much p hat typically varies from p. So you may recall that we had the standard deviation of the sampling distribution of p hat, and it looked like this. The only difference was that we knew the population proportion p. Now, we don't know this. We're trying to estimate it, so we will use p hat as our estimate as opposed to p. Alright, so now that you know what the standard error of p hat is, this is the way to calculate the full confidence interval for p. So, when the random and large counts conditions are met, a C% confidence interval for the population proportion p is, so again remember, every confidence interval follows this format. It's your point estimate, which in this case is going to be p hat, followed by a plus or minus margin of error. This entire quantity here is your margin of error. It consists of the critical values that we talked about yesterday multiplied by this standard error of p hat. Alright, so let's try an example out, and we're going to construct the full interval this time, which is something we've never done. So in this example it says, according to a 2016 Pew Research Center report, 73% of American adults have read a book in the previous 12 months. This estimate was based on a random sample of 1,520 American adults. Assume the conditions for inference are met. So right away, you are given the p hat, which is our sample proportion. So they're telling you that this research organization calculated 0.73 for the p hat. And they're also telling you that this was based on a sample of 1,520 American adults. So those are some two key values that we need. All right, so for part A, we are going to determine the critical value Z star for a 90% confidence interval. So I showed you guys how to do that yesterday, but I'll show you again just to make sure you're all right on that. And then after we get our Z star, we're going to construct a 90% confidence interval for the proportion of all American adults who have read a book in the previous 12 months. And then lastly, we are going to interpret the interval. All right, so we're going to interpret the interval, which is something you learned in chapter 7.1. We're going to interpret the interval, not the level, but the actual interval itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and first take a look at part A. So the critical Z value, you can use table A in your textbook, but you can also use inverse norm. And one way of doing this is taking 0.05 to the left. So if you're going to use a method that's shown here, it's 0.05 left area, and you will get a negative value, but you're going to take the positive. So Z star is 1.645, or you can round up to 1.65. So whichever one you decide to use shouldn't make that much of a difference. Okay, now let's say you do this on Statlet. So go to statlet.com, 2 P's, click on normal distributions. We want the value corresponding to an area, and let's use 0, 1, and we're going to plot that distribution. So take the central area of 0.90, and you are going to get 1.645. That is our Z star critical value at 90% confidence. All right, so now we're going to start to build our full interval using that value. So on part B, we are going to substitute our p hat right here. P hat is this value here. It's a decimal. Don't plug in a percentage. It's 0.73 plus or minus. Here's the z star that you just calculated. Now again, if you use 1.65 or 1.645, shouldn't be much of a difference. This is our standard error of p hat. So this is where you write p hat times 1 minus p hat all over n. All right, so if you do all of that correctly, your margin of error should come out to be 0.019. And to get the full interval, you're going to add that value to 0.73, and that'll give you your larger number of your interval. And then you're going to take 0.73 and subtract that, and that'll give you the smaller number in your interval. So we're looking at between 0.711, 0.749. And again, remember, these are really percentages. You do not have to write them as percentages, but keep in mind that that's what they are. So we're saying that we feel that the true proportion of adults who have read a book in the previous 12 months, American adults that is somewhere between 71.1% and 74.9%. Our true population proportion is somewhere in there. All right, let's interpret this answer. So again, we are interpreting the confidence interval and not the level. Okay, interpret the interval, not the level. Okay, interval, not the level. So what I mean by that is you're going to use this sentence frame. We are 90% confident that the interval from 0.711 to 0.749 captures the true proportion of American adults who have read a book in the previous 12 months. We are looking for the interval, and go back to chapter 7.1 if you need a refresher on how to interpret an interval. All right, one more problem. So go ahead and pause the slideshow and try this out on your own. Okay, one hint I'm going to give you before you start is you're going to have to find p hat using the values that are given here. You're not given p hat as a percentage right off the bat. You're going to have to do a little bit of division and figure that out on your own. So please pause the slideshow, give it a try, and check back when you are ready. All right, so your p hat, 84 divided by 227, should give you a value of 0.37. So that is our value of p hat. All right, and now we're at a 95% confidence interval. So our value of z star, so I'm going to go to Staplet quickly. So on Staplet, I want a central area of 0.95, and that z-star critical value is 1.96. That's a very common one, and if you memorize that, your life will be a lot easier. Z-star at a 95% confidence interval is 1.96. Oops, excuse me. All right, now we've got everything we need to find our confidence interval. So let's move on to the next slide here. All right, so I have this all pre-typed out for us here. So at the beginning, p hat 0.37 plus or minus. Here's our z star right here. Z star, p hat. In the radical, you write 0.37, and this will end up being 0.63. So 0.37 times 0.63 divided by 227 is going to be some number that we're going to take the square root of, and you multiply that by 1.96, and if all goes well, you should get 0.063. Remember, this is all called the margin of error. This entire quantity here is the margin of error. This part in the front is called your point estimate. And as you learned in chapter 7.1, every confidence interval is created from a point estimate plus or minus a margin of error. So here's our final confidence interval, 0.307 to 0.433. So we are 95% confident that the interval from 0.307 to 0.433 captures the true proportion of students who completed the Census at School survey who reported they have allergies. So that's going to be it for us today. So if you have any questions, please send me a message on Schoology, Google Classroom, or an email, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great day, everyone.